Welcome to another edition of Coaching Minute with Brianne Ligori and Friends, where certified coaches help leaders to develop their coaching skills so that you're able to better lead today's workforce. Today's guest is Paul Shields. Paul is a certified coach that has over 20 years of experience in both the hospitality and retail space. And today, Paul spends his time partnering with leaders to help them continue to grow their leadership and coaching skills. Welcome, Paul.
Thanks, Brianne, for having me. I'm really excited to chat with you.
Yes, you too. And we really first got connected through our LCI Coach certification when you became a certified coach a few years back. So it's great to be hanging out again together.
Yeah, and when I decided to go out on my own, coaching was something that I really wanted to do. And of course, the LCI program became very highly recommended. I had a great time with my cohort of fellow participants and had so much fun learning with you and Belinda, of course.
Oh, thank you so much. So you do a lot of work with organizations now, helping them to develop the leadership skills of their leaders. And of course, coaching being one of those really important skills for leaders. So from your perspective, tell me a little bit more about what coaching means to you and why now is it more important than ever?
Well, for me, coaching means I get to be genuinely curious every day with every person I coach, with every client I'm with. I'm lucky to work with really talented and smart individuals, and it's so much fun to be able to almost lose yourself in their stories and their challenges and their successes. And there's a freedom in not having to be an expert in what they do, right? Like their context is so important, and I get to learn and listen and really be able to support these really smart people to maybe unlock something that they weren't aware of, or that they wanted to find more awareness in, or whatever it is that they're looking for. So that's really, really exciting. As far as like why now is so important, I think that we could all use a little bit more awareness. We could all listen a little bit deeper and be a little bit more curious. If we were a little more curious, maybe we would be a little less judgmental, and we could all connect just a little bit easier.
Yes. Yeah, it's so true. And it really resonates with me what you're talking about around sort of almost taking off the pressure to be like an expert in a particular area. I think a lot of leaders struggle with this. I think we grow up in organizations as being a subject matter expert, but when we become a leader, subject matter expertise is probably only about 50% of what we do. The other piece is actually leadership and coaching. And so what we see at LCI is leaders struggle to really hold back on that subject matter expertise and giving that advice in terms of telling people what to do. But what we know about coaching is actually it's so much more effective to ask a question and help someone come up with their own solution. So for you, what words of wisdom do you have for leaders that are struggling on kind of holding back on giving that advice and really staying in coach mode?
Yeah, I think it's a really natural thing for leaders, for coaches, we all get into this because we like to solve problems. And when you're working with a coachee, oftentimes you almost that urge to jump out and give that advice and solve that problem and help that person in that way. I think it's a really natural thing. So as far as words of wisdom, I would remind people, like, it's okay, don't get too in your head about it, but be aware. And understanding when you have that urge to start giving that advice, you'll find tactics that really help you, short circuit or push that feeling aside, to ask one more really good question, to listen deep for a powerful word or a powerful phrase or something that your coachee keeps coming back to, and that it helps me, and it could help other coaches reframe their thought. And instead of sending that advice forward, sending the next question, right? Asking that taking that next step with your coachee, and reminding yourself you're there to support the person and not the problem. And that's something that, when we were doing coaching certification and working with great coaches like yourself, that was something that I really needed to bring to the forefront, and that I still remind myself of working with coaches today. I'll never be an expert at what my coachee is an expert at, or very rarely would I ever be an expert. So I'm not that person. I don't understand what's going on for them. So I just do my very best to stay curious, to keep asking that next question, and trust your clients. They're so smart. And don't beat yourself up too much, because we all want to solve problems. That's why we're here. That's why we love supporting others.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Trust is such a big piece. And I often find too, when we give advice, it takes the conversation in a completely different direction. It actually becomes about us rather than that piece of what you said about being about that person and that human being and helping them grow and evolve. So it takes time, it takes practice to really hold back on that advice. But when we do it, I think we see such a huge difference.
Yeah, for sure. Because, we are our own experts, right? We really do trust our ideas and our expertise and our knowledge more than most, right? More than most others. So I think it's important to remember that as you're talking with people, is let them trust them to trust themselves in a way, right? And listen to what they're saying, because the answers are in there. You have to keep asking good questions. You have to keep trusting that they'll find a way. And oftentimes, if I start a coaching session and I'm being asked for advice, oftentimes by the end of it, they have all the advice they need. They've said everything that I was going to say anyway, or most of what I was going to say anyway. So again, the trust is big, and just listen to your people.
Yes. Oh, such a good point. And so on that note of people asking you for advice, so as coaches, we really want to kind of stay in this coach position and asking questions, but often our coachees are used to getting advice. So they'll often default to advice and say, so what do you think? What are your thoughts on this? What do you think I should do? And so it's very tempting to jump in with those ideas that are swirling in our mind. How do you skillfully handle that situation when someone flat out says, what advice do you have for me, Paul?
Yeah, I think it's always a challenge for coaches, right? And part of it is the word coach has been so widely used that it can be a little confusing sometimes, particularly with folks who are new to having a coach. So you may get asked that, and I still get asked that by coaches I've been working with for some time now. One of the ways that I've had success in navigating through that is letting the client know, while I might have some ideas on their situation, it's really important to fully explore the situation, and really go through the questions and really expand the conversation before we jump to solutions. Sort of give some comfort in the fact that this is a process, right? We're doing this together. We're going to talk through the situation. We're going to talk through their goal, and listen and really understand the context and their context, not the context that I assume or the context that I would understand if I were in that situation. It really is about them. So I really just try and keep asking those questions, keep the conversation going, give some assurance that there is a process here, and we're here to have the conversation. And often, as I mentioned, usually by the time we get through that, coachees have found an answer and a solution that really works for them. And then, of course, like, we could have a discussion about, if there's a theory or a model or something in the learning and development world that could be supportive, that could be a conversation. But it is important to note that their solution isn't always something that I would think or that a coach might think is best, and that doesn't matter. It has to work for them. It has to be helpful in their situation, and they really are the experts. So their reality is the one that matters the most.
Yes. Yeah, they're an expert in their own life. They know what's best for them, and they're more likely to take action when they've come up with it rather than us sharing. What also stands out for me is sharing a little bit about the process with people. So for leaders and managers at LCI, we often recommend that very same thing. It's like sharing with your team what coaching is, what the benefits of that are, and that you are going to hold back on your traditional approach, maybe as a leader or manager, and giving advice, and you're going to ask questions. And so when you set the stage and the tone for people, like, it really shifts the conversation.
Yeah, and there's a if we think about it in leadership or coaching terms, like, there's an accountability there. If I start handing over all this advice and all these ideas, it can be pretty easy to detach for somebody. Well, Paul's idea didn't work, so I guess I'll, try something else, or I'll ask again, or this, instead of, this is a solution that I came up with. Maybe it did work, maybe it didn't, but then you can create another conversation. It creates other questions. You get more information on that topic specifically. It's a lot harder to disengage when you've helped somebody come up with their own solution as opposed to just handing them one.
Yes, yes. It is huge in driving engagement, especially
Yeah.
with today's modern workforce where people don't want to be told what to do. They really want to feel part of it. So it really shifts a lot of things when managers shift how they're leading and using coaching.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it comes down to the way that adults learn and connect and interact, right?
Yeah.
We have to have ownership. We have to know that our expertise and our knowledge is being recognized. So if we're just taking that power away from the coachees and just handing out advice right off the bat without, really understanding, or then I don't think we're getting true solutions. We're trying to cut and paste a solution from another problem onto this, and all of our stuff is so specific. The challenges that we have, while we might feel similarities, they impact us each differently. So that's, again, what's so important, just to understand their
Mhm.
context.
Yes. Yeah. Their lens, right? It's going to be different than our lens.
Yeah.
And speaking of adult learning, I mean, you've done a ton of adult learning in terms of developing your coaching skills, a ton of coach training. So, what was your biggest learning and takeaway from some of the coach training that you've had?
Well, I would say, like, going into the coaching certification, I would have considered myself a really good listener. I would have considered active listening a big strength. But then when you start coaching, being coached on a regular basis, when you start doing the exercises, I started to see some of the gaps in where, instead of listening to the next comment, I was looking for a solution, or I was trying to think about the next question I was going to ask, or think about where I thought the conversation would go, instead of really just being in the moment. So it's almost like two-pronged answer, that active listening and really understanding what it means to catch some of those powerful phrases or powerful words or important things that my coachee was saying. And then also that sort of prepare to coach and be present. So I wasn't letting my mind wander to, my next meeting, or, my phone that's going off, or whatever, all those tiny distractions we have in the world now. So I think that not only in coaching, but being coached during my certification, I really noticed the coaches that were most effective were able to really bring me back to the important things I said, ask really good questions to keep the conversation going. And just, then for me, it was sort of picking and choosing and borrowing wisdom from the people that I was working with. What were they writing down? How did you capture that thought? How did you stay with that phrase? Because I know myself as a coachee, I can be a little bit of a wanderer. I like to talk a lot. So it was nice to sort of get some of that interesting techniques and tips and tricks, and then really ask myself, like, how am I going to listen today? How am I going to be 100% present with this person? So that's was certainly something that I was maybe my biggest learning from my coaching training, was just how to be there 100% all the time with my coachees.
Yes, yes. And you're not alone in that. Like, we work with leaders across the world, and then we see this very same thing. Like, often people come in and they say, I'm a great listener. I don't need a refresher on listening. But actually, it's not that we're not good listeners. It's this whole piece on distractions, internal distractions, external distractions. And if we have so much going on in our mind and also around us, it's very, very hard to be present. So developing those techniques, like you mentioned, like prepare to coach or prepare for a meeting or whatever it is, by maybe setting an intention, taking a couple deep breaths to just really clear the slate for people, it really, really makes a difference in our ability to just be with the person side by side and set everything else aside
Yeah.
for now.
And I think that, I certainly can speak for myself. Life is noisy, right? Like regardless of whether it's pets or kids or family or friends or phones or work or whatever it is, like, we have very noisy lives. We live in an age where, information is at our fingertips, and notifications come flying through our computer screen that link with our phone, that do all of these things. So, like, how do you quiet that? And I don't think that I maybe realized how noisy it can be around my work, which is pretty calm. I've got my own office. It's a pretty calm existence for me. But then when we were being really specific and we were doing some of those exercises, I just realized that it might take a little bit more than, oh, I'm on this meeting, I'm focused here. It's like, no, I really have to turn my notifications off or put my phone on sleep or whatever. I have to, close my office door. I have to shut the world out a little bit, particularly when I want to be, or when I need to be that engaged and really focused on my clients. It's noisy out there. So for me, I had to find a way to quiet that down.
Yes, yes. And I learned my biggest tip from you, the focus button on my computer. Like I used it today, like, because I don't want to see emails popping up, because then I'm like, ooh, what's that? What'd that person say? It's just human nature, right? So thank you, Paul, for sharing your wisdom. We are so truly grateful to have you and have partnership with you. And we wish you all the best.
Thank you so much, Brianne, for your continued support, for all of the help you've given me in my career as I move forward. It's a pleasure to be here today, and anytime I would love to chat again.
Thank you so much. We'll see you soon.